Hey friends, it's Just the Gems. I'm Brandon. I've been collecting JRPGs and video games in general for what feels like an eternity, but is actually only like 3 or 4 years. Yes, I brilliantly began collecting in earnest right when the world shut down and video game prices skyrocketed. Do not take stock market advice from me. I am very bad at speculating. All in all, game collecting has become a hobby I really enjoy, but that's not to say that if I had it to do all over again, that I wouldn't make some changes. I want to talk about my 5 JRPG collecting regrets, so hopefully you can learn from my mistakes and be a better collector than I am. Now, if you're a JRPG lover and appreciator like me, would you consider subscribing? And if you like what I'm doing here, would you click like as well? Thanks so much. All right, let's talk regrets. I've seen a handful of videos about this topic from other creators I follow in recent months, but I think it's been long enough. I don't remember exactly what they talked about, so these are all my own legitimate collecting regrets. I'm not unduly influenced, so here we go. There is something innately appealing to me about a collector's edition. I'm not really a pack rat, but when it comes to dorky stuff that I enjoy, I am very much in favor of all the stuff that comes in collector's editions. Soundtracks? I mean, sure, give them to me. Art books? Why not? Scale figures? Well, yes please, at least on the rare occasion when figures are actually included.
You don't deserve me, you middle-aged waste of space.
Oh, Iba. She's just kidding.
No, I'm not.
Anyway, I love stuff that's related to the games I love. I've gotten some really great things in collector's editions over the years. Novellas like these from Tales of Symphonia and East 9, or this freaking awesome Joker mask from Persona 5 Royal, or pretty much any of the steelbooks I've gathered over the years because, oh boy, I love steelbooks. This might be starting to sound like I don't regret buying collector's editions, and to an extent, I don't. But to a much larger extent, I do. A part of my collecting journey was about, first of all, recapturing all the memories I had playing JRPGs as a kid, and secondly, about making sure I didn't regret missing out on any of those experiences going forward. But that presented another problem. What if I bought a game I'd never played and ended up loving it? Like, if it ended up being one of my all-time favorites, would I regret not having purchased the collector's edition? You might see where I'm going with this. If a JRPG was hitting store shelves and it had a collector's edition, that's what I pre-ordered. I have so many collector's editions for games that I've never played, games that I might not even like, games from series that are new and or completely unknown to me. I have so many art books, so many soundtrack sampler CDs, so many darn acrylic standees. I hate acrylic standees, everyone. I hate them so much. They're such a cheap way of giving the impression that your collector's edition has more in it than it does. I hate them. Make it stop, please. Please. For some games, buying the collector's edition is a no-brainer. A Trails game? You bet I'm getting the collector's edition. Xenoblade? Heck yes, assuming that Nintendo lets me. But if I had it to do again, I'd keep my collector's edition buying to just those handful of series that I'm already super invested in. If I truly love a new JRPG so much that it joins the upper echelons of games like Chrono Trigger or Xenogears, then I'll seek out the collector's edition, even if I have to pay inflated aftermarket prices. After all, I'll have saved so much on all those collector's editions I didn't buy, so I'll be able to afford it. I started out collecting Super Nintendo games before I broadened my parameters to every gaming platform under the sun. This was because the analog Super NT had just come out, and I was interested in rebuying all of the games I'd owned as a kid. I'd had quite the JRPG collection, and the only games I'd kept from my teenage years were Final Fantasy III and Chrono Trigger. But aside from all the JRPGs I gave up, there were a ton of non-JRPGs that I had nostalgia for, like Home Alone, an objectively terrible game, but one of the first things I ever played on the system. 2018 was long past the era when you could casually walk into a Goodwill or pawn shop and find every Super Nintendo game under the sun. You'd be lucky now to find a John Madden football cartridge, and even then the store's gonna charge you $10 for it because they don't know it's worthless. I'm not the patient type either, nor am I that big of a fan of, going places. So I was super grateful there was a platform like eBay available to me. Suddenly I had an entire country's worth of classic Super Nintendo games at my fingertips. I could even grab a boxed copy of Home Alone for a reasonable price. Did I need it boxed? No. But whatever. A big percentage of my 54 Super Nintendo games were purchased online. And honestly, if all I had ended up doing was recreating my childhood collection using eBay, I wouldn't even consider it a regret. The regret comes with what my eBay usage turned into. See, I started perusing eBay for any and every game I wanted to own on every console. This meant the fun inherent in game hunting was more or less lost on me, because while I did purchase some games from thrift stores and garage sales and retro game shops, most of them came directly from sellers on eBay. Not only that, but my eBay sprees almost certainly cost me more money than I should have spent on the games I bought. In some cases, sure, maybe I got a good deal if the value of a particular game kept increasing after I purchased it, but many of them likely saw a dip, meaning I could have conceivably saved money if I'd waited. It would be a different story if these were all games that I was playing as soon as I received them, but again, the vast majority have been relegated to the shelf, building up the backlog that has become so incredibly daunting. If I had it to do over, like I said, I might still have bought most of my old Super Nintendo games from eBay. But the rest? I think I'd be a little choosier with my online purchases. Only go to eBay when I want to grab a game and play it immediately. Actually, this regret leads quite naturally into my next regret, which is I definitely experienced some FOMO in my general eBay purchases. Oh, you're probably aware of this, but in case you're not, FOMO is fear of missing out. Other old people out there, I got you. Don't want you being as confused as I was when I heard the term drip for the first time. The FOMO I felt for those eBay purchases was more a fear of having to pay a lot more if I didn't pick up every game right now. In some cases, that fear was justified, like I said, but in plenty of others, my twitchy trigger finger ended up costing me extra. But the FOMO I'm talking about here is specifically related to certain hard-to-find modern games. Some of the sorts of games I'm into are only printed on a limited basis, not like a true limited run game or anything, but games from a publisher that just assumes they won't do so hot in the US, so they don't print a ton of copies. Some of the Atelier games come to mind, as well as Blue Reflection. I guess just Gust games in general. They seem to be lacking some self-confidence because they are pretty timid with their releases. The best example I have of my FOMO costing me is Blue Reflection, a game which at one point was going for over $200 complete in box. I didn't know much about the game, but I saw the trends and knew that if I didn't get it soon, it was going to become like so many Sega Saturn JRPGs, priced way beyond my means. I happened upon the only copy at the Midwest Gaming Classic one year, and I haggled them down from $200 to $190. And I walked away with a pretty minty used copy of the game, feeling like a winner. A few months later, Video Games Plus announced they were producing a reprint and charging only the standard $60 price. So yeah, I overpaid by about $130. Now, I'll be 100% honest. Even though this is by far the biggest single amount my FOMO has ever cost me, I don't mind all that much. I enjoy Blue Reflection to a level that I felt like it was well worth the $190 I spent, and I was glad it was being made available again so more people could get it. But there are other games my FOMO caused me to grab that I haven't played yet. Games like the Atelier Mysterious trilogy, for example, which I also purchased just before reprints were announced. Essentially, if you'd like a barometer that shows you when Video Games Plus is going to reprint a game, just ask me what games I've purchased for too much money lately, and there's your answer. Again, like I said, if I pay a lot for a game, play it right away, and love it, then I don't really mind overpaying. It's when the game is still sitting there unplayed that I start to feel regret when more are suddenly made available for less money. I'm still happy for y'all who get to buy the games for a good price, but I'm gonna be over here nursing my bank account back to health. Before I started actually collecting games, I watched a ton of video game collectors on YouTube. Your Games Chaser, your Retro's Rick, your Metal's Jesus. Seeing those massive collections, I knew deep down inside that I never wanted to have that kind of collection. Nothing wrong with it, but that was just too many games. Not only did I have no place to put that many games, but there were tons that just didn't appeal to me. Sports games were right out, of course, but most platformers outside of Mario and Sonic I had no interest in, which means the vast majority of the earlier Nintendo and Sega libraries were of no interest to me. No, I was going to be a JRPG collector. Full stop. Here's the problem, and where the regret starts to seep in. I collected JRPGs all right. Problem was, I wasn't very choosy with my JRPGs. See, the thing is, there are only a handful of criteria that must be met for a game to be a JRPG. It needs to be made in Japan, or at least inspired by the style of role-playing games popularized in Japan. and it needs to have enough role-playing elements that only the most irritating of gamers online can argue against it being a real RPG. So long as it meets those criteria, it's a JRPG. Here's the problem. That means there are a ton of JRPGs, and honestly, and I hate to say this, but not all of them are good. Some of them are, of course. Some of them are great. But a lot of them are not so great games that are doing their best to imitate the classics, but not quite getting there. Or games that might have been pretty okay in their native language, but they got butchered in translation. Or even perfectly competent games with stories that just didn't end up appealing to me. We have the vast resources of the internet available to us at basically all times, so I really don't have an excuse for buying so many JRPGs that just aren't very good. I could have read a few reviews. In fact, some of the games I've purchased over the years, I sort of suspected I wouldn't like them when I bought them. Did I think Robo-Trek was going to be an amazing JRPG experience I would think about for years to come? Or Dark Savior? Or freaking Seema the Enemy? No. And those are just a handful of the pricey games I picked up because they were JRPGs. Not because I knew they were well received or sounded particularly appealing to me, just because they checked the very few boxes necessary to be a JRPG. If I was starting collecting today, I would take a step back and try and narrow down my collecting criteria even more. For example, am I really going to like the Hyperdimension Neptunia games? Can I maybe just try one out before I go and spend a bunch of money on a ton of games that probably aren't going to be my thing? Can I read a review or two of Folklore on the PS3 before I spend my hard-earned money on it and give it several hours of my time before giving up in boredom and frustration? Am I ever going to hook up my Xbox 360 and play Record of Agarest War or Infinite Undiscovery? I mean, am I really? Curating is becoming more and more important to me, and I think my collecting situation would be much better off if I'd made it important back when I started, too. Like I mentioned earlier, game hunting is fun. At least it is for me. I knew I would enjoy it based on all the game collecting videos I'd seen, and when I finally got to go out and do it for myself, I consistently had a blast. But one problem I didn't foresee is that by restricting my collecting to a specific genre, I was putting a life expectancy on my collecting journey. There are only so many JRPGs out there, and even grabbing almost every one regardless of their quality, I didn't have a ton of runway to work with. That's why I'm here now, with a giant collection of JRPGs and a wish list that's almost completely empty. Yes, this regret is sort of the culmination of all my other regrets, the end result of not collecting responsibly. I went too fast, and now there's less to look forward to. I don't want that to sound more depressing than it actually is. Obviously, there are still new games coming out all the time, and plenty of them look fantastic, and I'm really looking forward to them. But instead of enjoying the ride of putting together my collection gradually, I bought huge chunks of it on eBay. I let FOMO take over and grabbed games I wasn't planning on playing right away, only to end up overpaying. I wasted money on extra expensive editions of games that I would have been just as happy, or maybe even happier, with the standard. My rush to acquire every JRPG I could is coming back to bite me now. While it's great that I have this library of games I can use as I want, I'm bummed that most game hunting expeditions end in disappointment now. Finding anything at a garage sale or even a video game convention is almost impossible, because I'll more than likely already have whatever it is I find. And I'm not really a reseller. I find that to be more of a hassle than I'm willing to put up with, so I'm not motivated to rebuy games I already own just to try and make a little money on them. If I had slowed my roll, used eBay less, my collection would be a lot smaller, it's true. But I'd have a lot more to look forward to. Now most of the games on my wish list are like Working Designs games on the Saturn, Panzer Dragoon Saga, things like that. Games that are so expensive that I feel pangs of guilt even thinking about buying them. Now, none of these regrets are really that big of a deal. There are worse problems in the world, for sure. And if I was really serious about doing this all again, but better, well, I could. I could sell this entire collection to like Phoenix Resale or something and start over. Some people have done that. It'd probably make good content now that I'm thinking about it. But no, what's done is done, and like I said, I'm glad to have this library of games now. I'm sure I'll be paring it down over the next several months, getting rid of some games that I know now I'm not crazy about, unloading a bunch of these collector's editions in favor of the standard. But my hope is that maybe these regrets will be helpful to at least someone out there, someone who's maybe just starting out with collecting games. If you're at all like me, then you're probably just as likely to fall into these traps, so I hope you can learn from my experience. So, those are my collecting regrets. What about you? Any other collectors out there have regrets, things you do differently? Let me know down in the comments. Again, if you wouldn't mind liking the video, apparently that tells YouTube I don't suck, I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you enjoy JRPGs, would you consider subscribing? Anyway, until next time. Bye.